All right, welcome, my friends, to the next episode here, the Red Delta Project podcast, live feed Q&A here, simplifying fitness by taking a fundamental approach to diet and exercise, all in the goal of helping you break free of the diet and exercise rat race. I'm Matt Schifferly. Today's topic is sponsored by and all about my latest book, Be Fit, Live Free, came out about a month ago or so. You can find links to download it either on Amazon or purchase the paperback on Amazon, or through the latest RDP PDF store as well, if you prefer PDF versions of that. But today we're talking about three of the biggest key takeaways that you find from this book, because this is going to be unlike any other fitness book out there. This is not a book about what you should eat. It's not about how many sets and reps you're supposed to do or some sort of new workout program and stuff. Instead, this is getting down to the rock solid bedrock of how fitness works in general. Because when you really think about it, most of our fitness culture is not predicated on how fitness works. Instead, it's more of what I like to call a method-based approach. If you ask most people, well, how do you lose weight? How do you build muscle? How do you get in better shape? They're inevitably usually going to tell you what kind of method that they would recommend. You should do CrossFit. You should have a vegan diet. You should eat these foods. You should not eat those foods. You should have a high volume or low volume or whatever. And this advice isn't necessarily bad, but it's largely based off of correlation versus causation. Because ultimately, what you eat and how you eat and what you're doing in your workouts and how many sets and reps you do and stuff is important, but it's ultimately not really what dictates your results. Your results don't come from the workout program you follow. Your results don't come from the diet that you follow. Instead, the first big key takeaway that you find in this book is understanding that everything about why fitness works is happening completely on autopilot. It's the fundamental processes of Mother Nature that are in control of the condition of your body. There is nothing you do as far as diet and exercise and lifestyle habits that take control over your health and fitness, contrary to what we've been told. And this is admittedly a little bit frustrating at first, because ultimately we're all in this fitness game because we want to have control. Many of us get into fitness because we have some sort of an event, usually in our lives, where we feel like we're losing control. We see a photo of ourselves and we don't like the way our body looks, or we get a prognosis from the doctor saying, this is the status of your health, and you're like, oh my goodness. Or it could be just as simple as you help a friend move some furniture or something. You're like, gosh, I used to feel a lot stronger. Why am I not stronger? Anyway, we get this sense of, I'm not as in control of how my body looks, feels, or performs. I want to have more control of this thing. This can happen at any point in our lives, and it can be from any number of circumstances, but usually that's why we get into it. So we often fall down that rabbit hole of, well, how do I have that control? How do I control how much fat is on my body? How do I control how much muscle I have? How do I control my performance? And that's when we get into, what's the best way to lose weight? What's the best way to build muscle? What's the best exercise for abs and all these other sorts of things? And we get really lost into a method-based approach. But there's a very big, well, actually several big problems with a method-based approach. One is good luck finding a straight answer from the internet or even just from a panel of experts on what a good or best approach is. Because you get one guy is like, oh, you need to lift free weights and high volume training to build muscle. And then the next guy is like, nope, machines are best and low volume is the best. And this other person says, if you want to lose weight, you've got to be, keto, and you've got to have high fat and lots of protein. This other person over here is like, no, low fat is best, and vegan is the way to go, and whole grains and everything. And it's not so much that this stuff is very different, but oftentimes it's so conflicting too. You got one guy saying X is great, and the other guy is saying the complete opposite is the way to go about it. So this leads us to a lot of paralysis by analysis, a lot of confusion. And even if you're on a good path for you, you can feel like you're getting pulled in 100 different directions because admittedly, we usually don't quite get the results we want as quickly as we want them from anything. And of course, everything on the internet is hyped up like crazy. So if you're not doing this diet or that workout or doing things exactly this way, oh, you're missing out. Oh, you better be doing it this way. Oh, if you're not eating enough fat, you're going to kill your gains and all this sort of stuff. So there's a lot of messages in our fitness culture that are all about hype and hoopla and utopian thinking, like it's going to lead you to the promised land. And there's a lot of stuff out there like, oh, if you do that the wrong way, even a little bit, you're doomed to failure and it's going to end in complete catastrophe. And this is usually just hype and stuff because most of the time it's not really nearly that good or that bad. It's just kind of in that middle ground of, probably isn't going to matter a whole heck of a lot. And furthermore, a method-based approach can be very confusing because when we look at it just even anecdotally, we observe that there are plenty of people with a given result who don't follow any consistent method. You take 100 people who've lost weight and you're going to find 100 different diets behind it. You take 100 people who've built muscle, you're going to find 100 different programs behind it. So if any one particular method is really that important or special, there should at least be some sort of congruency in our fitness culture on almost everybody who's built muscle does X. Almost everybody who's lost weight does Y. And that's almost never the case. Furthermore, whenever you've got someone saying, oh, you have to do this program or you have to do this kind of diet, it's like, yeah, but there are billions of people who have that result who don't do that. In case in point, I studied abroad in Japan when I was in college. This is a little bit before the whole low carb thing came about and no one really knew Atkins and stuff. But nowadays, people are like, oh, processed grains, they're terrible. Oh, white rice, oh my God, it's the worst thing you can ever eat. There's no way you could be healthy and fit and lean if you have processed grains. I'm like, I literally was in a country with billions of people for months on end. Everybody eats tons of white rice and nobody's unfit, nobody's fat, nobody's unhealthy. So just that anecdotal evidence alone, I mean, research and scientific evidence is great, but just anecdotally, that enough should give us some sort of questioning on whether or not the validity of certain methods is really necessary, because that's what this whole fundamental approach is based off of. Years ago, I stopped caring so much about what supposedly worked when it came to diet and exercise, and instead I started to ask what was necessary. Because when you understand what is absolutely necessary, you can figure out very quickly and easily what's going to work best for you. And that's what you really need to know. Because the real answers you're looking for are not going to come from Googling what's the best exercise for six-pack abs, what's the best diet for weight loss, what's the best program for building muscle. The question you really should be asking is, what's the best exercise for me to build six-pack abs? What's the best dietary approach for me to lose weight? What's the best workout program for me to build muscle? Because for every person that's found success with a program, there's just as many people who have had catastrophic results on the same program. So we have to really look at the cracks in the foundation to this method-based approach, which most of our fitness culture is based off of, that keeps you running around in circles and basically turns this whole fitness endeavor into a wild guessing game or wild goose chase, and instead understanding how it actually does work so you can get on the right track and repeatedly apply the habits that are going to work best for you. And that's what we're talking about today. But let's get to some of these questions here. It's always so good to see you. Zilla, what's up, Matt? It's good to see you. Hey, Simon, how's it going? Hey, Matt, just seeing you live. Or this before I head off to the gym. Good luck in your workout today, my friend. Yes, it's a Sunday in New Zealand. At least, Jim, be quiet. Absolutely. I always say, Saturday mornings, Sunday afternoons, those are the best times to work out for most people, because especially Sunday, if you're well rested, you're well fed, you're feeling really good. I always love working out Saturdays. Oh man, this is the best time to work out. Simon has continued to put out a few books. Thank you very much. Yep. So Zaid is coming back on. It's good to see, as always, Zaid. Saying, hey, Matt, is falling off the wagon in normal behavior? How long should you take to get back on track? Oh, very good question. So there's a couple ways to address this. Number one is, yes, of course it's normal. It happens to everybody. Happens to everybody a lot. Don't ever believe someone if they're like, yep, I was on this diet and I stayed with it and I stuck to it for years and never had a problem. I was regularly doing this workout, and I just stayed with it, and I've never had any trouble with it. Yeah, right. I call BS big time on that stuff. And we have to also ask ourselves, what is falling off the wagon too? Lots of times this falling off the wagon is an all or nothing approach. So if you're doing some sort of low carb, low sugar kind of thingy, and you have one Oreo cookie, is that falling off the wagon? Now, if you've got a dreaded all or nothing mindset, which is absolutely toxic, then yes, that's falling off the wagon. You're like, oh, I've completely blown it. And then you go and you just basically wolf down an entire bag of Oreos or something like that. And that's when you're really, quote, off the wagon. Or is it something where you say, okay, I was trying this approach, but then I went on vacation and it was kind of hard to apply? Here's the way I always look at it, is off the wagon usually refers to you've got a plan, and then for whatever reason, you were no longer able to follow the plan. Okay, so whatever that means, whatever rules you have, because it's relative and subjective for everybody. For some people, going on vacation and saying, yep, I'm going on vacation and I'm not going to stick to my usual dietary guidelines. I'm not even going to try to work out. And then they come back and get right back onto it. They haven't fallen off the wagon because it was planned. It was a planned break from what they're doing. But someone who's like, I'm going to work out every day and I'm going to stick to my diet like glue as I go on this cruise, and on the first day, it all completely goes off the rails. They feel like they've gone off the wagon, right? So it's all about what is the plan. And usually, another big lesson we could take away from this book, when we are especially consistently finding ourselves falling off the wagon, it's not our fault. It's the fault of the plan of not being flexible enough. Because there are three factors that we have to consider when it comes to these considerations of the scenario. You've got the state you're in right now, okay, whatever level of body fat you got, or however strong you are, or however fast you can run. And then you've got your destination you want to reach. I want to lose 10 pounds. I want to build some muscle. I want to improve my jump shot, whatever that is. Now, those 2 points you can do nothing about. You're where you're at and the goal you want is there. But the only thing you have any type of control over changing is the path going there. And if you find yourself having trouble staying on the path, you have to change the path. That is the only thing you have any sort of control over, because nobody has the ability to say, this is my plan, I'm going to stick to it like glue, and they do for all times, and then they reach their destination. Never happens. This is the old saying, no battle plan survives contact with the enemy, or everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. That old saying, right? The fact of the matter is, if you're falling off a lot, it usually means you have a bad plan. It's not a fault of yours. If you're like, I'm never going to eat sugar and carbs again, and then every weekend comes around and you start plowing through Ben and Jerry's and all sorts of things, what that means is your plan sucks. Because the first and foremost measure of anything that's effective with diet and exercise is how easy is it for you to follow. If it's really a struggle for you to follow it, I don't care what the science is behind it. You could show me every research report in the world on how running 10 miles a day and eating nothing but bean sprouts is the best possible way to be healthy and fit. If you have trouble following it, it's a bad plan. Full stop. Because you, my friend, are a human being. And while the science and the evidence-based research and understanding the fundamental principles of Mother Nature are what are controlling your fitness, we also have to include the fundamental processes of human nature in order for it to actually work. And people say this all the time. It's like, oh, this is a great plan as long as you're willing to do the work. Well, if you're not willing to do the work, it's a bad plan. I'll say that again. If you're not willing to do what it takes to follow that plan, or can't do it for whatever reason, don't have time, don't have the skills, don't have the motivation to do it, or it's a bad plan. And there's no two ways about that. So that means you have to change it. You have to tweak it. Like every weekend, I fall off the wagon. Okay, why are you doing that? We have to understand what is happening that's causing that from happening, and then take preventative measures. Now, you could have a very flexible and adaptive approach like me. People ask me all the time, Matt, how often do you skip a workout? Fact is, I've never skipped a workout. Why? because I never have a planned workout. Every single day, I'm literally waking up going, should I work out today or not? What would I do? How should I do it? I don't feel like working out my legs today. I did hiking yesterday. Okay, I'm not going to do. There's no plan that's rigid and structured for me to fall off of. Therefore, I'm never off of it. Same thing with my diet. I follow no structured dietary plan whatsoever. I eat whatever I want, whenever I want, however much I want, because I'm just going after eat to satisfy, which is really what makes a diet healthy and work for you. So if I don't have super strict rules to follow, I never fall off the wagon, because there is no wagon to fall off of. It's only a matter of how successful am I with my habits, and I'm almost always successful to some degree. So in that way, as we'll get into it a little bit more here, I can't possibly lose because I'm always doing something that's moving the needle forward. Simon coming back on saying, I don't care about weight on a surplus, trying to put some muscle on, 46 years old, drug-free, but keen to go down the road of drugs now, though. So, sorry, back and forth. Yeah, so we've got to always look at different things that are going for our situation. What may be appropriate for one person's situation is not appropriate for another. And again, that method-based approach screws people over because they're like, this is good, this is bad. Always. No, it's not. A plan that works great for one person is a good plan. Plan that doesn't work for someone is bad. And then you're going after trying to make a bad plan work, which is kind of like trying to force feed yourself rotten eggs all the time. Dan Osek, it's good to see you. Matt, loved your latest post, number 16. Yes, my friends, don't forget that I have the 24 days of building more muscle with calisthenics training videos coming up on my YouTube channel. And day 16 came out, strength and hypertrophy. I currently do a 4x10 routine for strength with the IsoMax. Great. Then one more set to failure at a lower weight. Great advice. Yeah, and since you have the IsoMax, one thing that I've found that at least works great for me, you might want to try, is on the 4x10 for strength, use the load mode for that. So that way you can have your quantifiable measurement of how much force you're using, because you're trying to measure your strength. But when it comes to getting the fatigue going, use the time mode for that and go at a really low weight. So that, because of course, if you fail to hit that weight anymore, it resets the timer. So if you have a lower weight or relatively low weight, then you can just kind of sit back and let the beeps happen, because usually you're going to be doing that for 20, 30, 40, maybe even a minute. It's kind of hard to count that stuff, and it's a pain in the neck to just watch a clock if you don't have to. So that's what I usually do for that type of approach. And if you want, you can play with like a moderate load on the time mode, and then when you lose the beeps, that means you've, quote, hit failure, because that's literally what failure is no longer being able to have that much tension. Zaid coming back saying, hey, Matt, if you can do the tuck front lever comfortably, how do you use it to blast the hell out of your back without repping it out? Well, it's just time. It's just time. So if you are able to hold the tuck front lever comfortably, how do you use it to blast the hell out of your back? So usually when we're talking about really taking it to the muscles, we're talking about something for just a longer duration. More duration, more fatigue. So see if you can hold it for 20 seconds. 30 seconds, 40 seconds, in fact. If you can only hold it for a couple seconds, too heavy for that sort of thing. Good for strength, but not for that objective. So I would say set a timer up, maybe get something on your phone that can give you a little bit of a countdown. I use the Gym Boss timer on my phone, and that way I can program a countdown. So I can hit play, and it gives me like 10 seconds to get into position, and then it'll beep, and then the real countdown starts. So that works pretty well for that sort of thing. And then you can have a quantifiable metric of how much time you're using. Steve Z is saying, hey, Matt, appreciate your fitness philosophy. Thank you. It's made me comfortable finding what works for me. Yes, I do a few minutes of exercise every few hours through the day to get out of my chair. Thanks. Very good. It's the thing with utilizing a approach like that is so great as far as mental fatigue too, because moving throughout the day is what we are designed for. Working out, I always said working out in a gym or doing a static standard workout is kind of like a zoo. You take a zebra, right? And you put it in a zoo. You're taking this wild and natural organic thing and you're taking it in, putting it into this artificial, gated, very constructed, structured environment. And that's what a workout is. And I'm not saying it's terribly bad or anything. I'm just saying that we're meant to be moving all the time. We're meant to be utilizing our body throughout the day, every day. And the concept of working out is kind of weird because it's like, okay, we've got our life, in which case we're mostly sedentary. And then we go to the gym and we're really pushing our bodies really hard. And then we go back home and we're back to being fully sedentary for hours or days on end. We're not built for that. We're built to be active in some way, shape, or form on a regular basis. And that's why I love calisthenics and isometrics. Some people will find this handy if they've got like a kettlebell laying in their living room where it's like, oh, I'm kind of feeling a little tight and lethargic and stuff. They'll get like 20 swings in and be like, great, awesome. Because one of the biggest lessons in a fundamental approach to fitness is that you don't get results because you work out. You don't get results because you exercise. You get results because you create a stimulus from your physical training. And creating a stimulus happens anytime you're just using your body on purpose. That's all it takes, is just using your body with concentration of trying to level up how well you're using your body. That's all it takes to get results. Now, naturally, that happens a lot when we're exercising. I'm trying to lift a heavier weight. I'm trying to do more push-ups. I'm trying to balance better on one leg. But the very act of your brain trying to get your body to perform at a higher level, that is the impetus. That is the thing that makes training effective. It's not how hard you work. It's not whether or not you do a certain number of sets and reps, or if you work out for an hour or 10 seconds. What is important is whether or not you're creating that fundamental stimulus. And it doesn't matter how you're doing that. Seriously, if you're creating a stimulus of making your biceps work hard against resistance, it doesn't matter what your routine is. It doesn't matter what exercise you're doing. It doesn't matter what tool you're using. It doesn't matter if you do it throughout the day or all at once and stuff. Most of these things are just trivial little variations of the same thing. Your biceps are going to get bigger and stronger if they're being subjected to a higher functional demand of just being able to contract harder. That's all it needs to be. So you now have the freedom to do it however you see fit for you. More on that in a second. Let me get to some more questions. Zaid's following up saying, is the back lever worth the risk of injury? Well, I mean, everything's got a risk of injury. I've always never really found much to it. I've done skin the cats and tucked back levers and stuff. And I'm always, that's a general thing with calisthenics skills in me, is I've always just kind of been like, I don't get what this is supposed to do. Like, yeah, it's hard. Yeah, it's a like fancy thing. It looks cool, but I'm always looking at like, what is this telling my body what it needs to do? And I've always looked at calisthenics skills kind of like it's telling me to be able to do this skill. In which case I'm like, well, what the hell do I care? Like, I don't give a damn if I can't do a back lever. That's not at all important to me. So remember that there's only two good reasons to engage in any diet and exercise habit. It's either desired or required. And 9 times out of 10, it's never going to be required. No particular diet or exercise is generally a requirement. So then it's just purely down to, do you like it? Do you want to do it? And if not, then don't worry about it. You're not missing out on anything. But if you have your heart set on it, then go for it. Trey Lee is saying, where and how do I find the motivation to start working out? I've been wanting to get back into the gym, rock climb like I used to when I was in college. Thanks for the help. So remember, and this is again in the book, I have an entire chapter on motivation. Because remember, my friends, you can know everything there is to know about how fitness works physically and the laws and principles of Mother Nature and stuff, and none of that will do you one lick of good if you don't understand how we humans fundamentally operate. And that's basically motivation. Motivation. How do we have motivation? And motivation is down to the fundamental process. And again, these processes are always ongoing. Everything about fitness is always happening completely on autopilot. Your habits don't do anything unique. All they're doing is they're taking that process and they're directing it in the way you want to go. So motivation is all about the process of perceived benefit to perceived cost. If you're doing an activity and there's a very high perceived benefit to a low perceived cost, then your motivation to do it will skyrocket. And if the opposite is true, where it feels like it has a very high perceived cost and not really a whole lot of benefit, as I was just saying with uh, calisthenics like skills, every time I try to get into it a little bit, or my friend is like, I'll give you a challenge. Let's see how many muscle ups you could do. It's a lot of work and it's a lot of effort and it's time and a lot of just cost. And in the back of my mind, I was like, I just don't get it. I have no perceived real benefit to doing this short of just being better at the skill, in which case, what the hell do I care? So that's why I don't do it, because I have no motivation to do it. It's a high cost, low perceived reward. So in your case, getting back into it, how do you find the motivation? Well, it's more of how do you like build the motivation? How do you construct the motivation? If you're looking at a gym and you're like, I'm just not motivated to go to gym. Okay, yeah, sure. A lot of people are like that. You have the cost of going to the gym and changing into your clothes, and it may not be an environment you feel particularly comfortable in. It's like, I don't like the music here and the atmosphere, and I only can go after work, and it's packed, and I got to wait for machines, and I'm kind of self-conscious. I feel like people are looking at me because I know I'm a newbie and stuff. These are all costs that are mounting up, and even if you're not aware of it, subconsciously, your subconscious, your emotional subconscious is keeping the balance sheet of, okay, all of this stuff is costing me, so it better be worth it. And the fact of the matter is that a lot of people never get entirely what they want out of their training. They don't get results big enough or fast enough and quick enough and substantial enough. So as a result, their perceived reward is relatively low. And if the perceived cost is relatively high, well, forget it. You're screwed. You have no motivation to do it. You simply won't do it. So the solution for you is keep the costs low. Keep the perceived cost low. What is going to be a way for you to exercise that's going to cost you less time, less effort, less energy, less money, all these sorts of things? And don't join a rock climbing gym that's an hour away. If you've got even a little bit of a boulder field that's 5 minutes from where you live, and you're like, yeah, but it's not much of a boulder field. Well, use that instead. Do whatever's easiest now. You could say, going to the gym is such a pain in the neck, and I've got this long cockamamie workout that's like 2 hours long. It's got all these. Well, do a set of lunges and push-ups. There you go. What can you easily do? That's always the question to ask yourself, especially when starting out. What can you start to do with as little effort as possible? It's going to take some effort, of course, right? But effort and hard work are liabilities, my friend. They increase your perceived cost. And the higher your perceived cost is, you have to make it work. It's kind of like a business. Or I always think of I used to train a guy who worked in Hollywood. And he's like, man, these studios that invest big into pictures and stuff, they are taking such a risk. And I was like, what do you mean? It's like, well, look at this picture. It was something that was just coming out. It's like, it cost $80 million to make this picture. And he was telling me the economics of a picture is they've got the cost of the picture, but then you've got the marketing to it. It's like, in general, a motion picture needs to make 2.5 to 3 times what it originally cost to make it in order for it to, quote, break even. So he's like, they've got this huge budget. They've got this huge amount of expense. So they have to be a blockbuster hit. If they're even a modest hit, that's going to fail. Versus you've got other pictures out there. If you remember the Blair Witch Project, what came out, I think they put the cost of that picture on their credit card or something. It was like $10,000, $30,000 or something. It was nothing to make. So all they needed to do was like make $100,000 and they would have been in the black. And of course, they went on and made millions. And that's why Hollywood was like, oh, this is great. Why? Because it was cheap, because the effort was low, because it was all low. So start easy, my friend. Start with easy habits, and preferably things that are going to have a broad appeal to you as well. Okay, lunges, pull-ups, push-ups, boom, there, done. They bring a lot of benefit, and they are relatively, low work, low effort. So the motivation to do it. If you're like, oh, back in college, I used to rock climb for 3 hours. Don't climb for 3 hours now. If you've got like this 60-hour-a-week job and you just got married and you've got all these other pressing engagements, Yeah, when you had a ton of free time, 3 hours was a lower cost. But now that you're busy as hell, 3 hours is a very high cost. So that's going to be detrimental to your motivation. So start with things that are easy to do and provide a good reward, preferably as fast as possible. Instant gratification is a very powerful thing, my friends. Use it. It's good to see you again. It's been a while. Saying, hey, Matt, my elbows get injured a lot, and I think it's because of bad tension control. Sort of, yes. Do you think lowering the load intensity and focusing on mind-muscle connection can help? It will help, absolutely, because remember that whenever we are going towards the extremes of the two fundamental variables of strength training, right? We've got tension and we got time. Those are the two variables. You got all forms of strength training, from powerlifting to bands and Bowflex and everything. It all boils down to how much tension is in the muscle and how long am I tensing it for. It all boils down to just those two things. So whenever you're getting more to the extremes of either variable, your technique and your tension control is going to get compromised. All right. I want that to really sink in, because if you're like, push-ups, great, I'm going to do 1,000 a day, chances are you're going to be compromising your ability to do push-ups at some point because you're going after the extremes of time. Or if you're saying, all right, I'm going to try my best to be able to do a pull-up with 100 pounds or something. Yeah, but now you're going on the extremes of how much tension can you create. And if you've got a detrimental habit of shrugging your shoulders, winging out your elbows, kicking up your legs, whatever warts you've got in your program, we all have them, those are going to get amplified. The things that are bad are going to get worse. The things that are detrimental are going to become catastrophic. And it's not to say don't go to the extremes, by all means, but you have to go to the extremes sparingly. That's why even powerlifters, their whole sport is about how much weight can you lift, will only go after their really high numbers sporadically throughout the year. They're not doing that all the time. Gosh, no. And so that's something to be aware of first and foremost. The other thing is your tension control for such things, particularly in the elbows, is usually not in the areas you think it needs to be. Usually it's in the back. And one of the things, I addressed this in one of the recent videos on my YouTube channel on building more muscle with calisthenics, is the power of being able to adduct your back muscles. Most of the muscles in our back pull inwards towards your spine. Your lats, your traps, your rhomboids, even your shoulders to a large degree. And a lot of times when people do vertical pulling motions, they're getting up and forward, so they're spreading outwards. And that is bringing your elbows out of alignment, and that's why it's causing that kind of stress. So yes, tension control for sure, but it's in your back. Definitely bring down both the time and the tension. Work on keeping those shoulders back. I recommend practicing more with just regular rows rather than vertical for a couple of weeks to really dial it in. Cristobal saying, hey, Matt, good to see you. As well, you, my friend. Can you tell us, how does your current training look like? It's always changing, of course. It's always adapting to my circumstances. I've been doing a lot of isometrics over the past week, just because that's what I do from time to time. It's a good, nice way to break things up. I'm primarily using my iso trainer. It's kind of fun when I'll take a week or two, and basically that's about 90% of everything I use. It's just those straps. And I can hit everything I want extremely hard. And it never fails. Whenever I take a week or two and focus on isometrics, it always levels up everything about my dynamic training. I mean, just the other day, like, I haven't, in all honesty, been able to do an adequate pistol squat in a dog's age. I've got this weird, wonky left hip, lower back area. I've had it since I was a kid. And so anytime that I would try to do pistol squats, it'd usually be pretty sloppy and messy because my strength in that area is terrible. My mobility is even worse. My tension control is, well, used to be a lot worse and everything. And the other day I had to demonstrate pistol squats to a friend, and I just was like, oh, what the hell? Let me give it a try. And I went down and it was fine. I was like, holy crap, I can do pistol squats now. Why? Because of the isometrics. Purely because of that. So I'm doing a lot of isometrics at the moment. Lots of isometrics, really enjoying it. Push-pull squat is still my main way of going about things. I'm finding that a lot of the isometrics, particularly the stuff I covered in my book, a lot of the single joint stuff, the curls, tricep extensions and stuff like that, The more I go into that stuff, the more it's like, yeah, it's fun, it's satisfying, but I don't think it's really all that necessary. Not that, the single joint stuff is all that necessary to begin with, and certain opinions of matter. But when it comes to isometrics, I mean, I can easily just tell my triceps to turn on more during a chest press. You can have a lot more control over what muscles are working. So I've been working with a lot more just compound based movements with the isometrics, and it's been very, very rewarding. Master Dave coming on. Hello, Matt. I need minimal upper body assistance for the suspension Bulgarian split squat just to keep better balance. Yes. I can also do 20 reps or more. Would you recommend the hover lunge instead? That can be a good place to start. Hover lunges. So let me see if I got that right. Bulgarian split squat. So yeah, usually when I'm training people, if they're on the Bulgarian split squat and they're doing fairly well with that, then what I'll do is I'll turn them around and have them do the hover lunges holding onto the straps. And that's a good progression from there. Going with the regular hover lunges may be a bit of a jump for you, because you're going from some assistance on your back leg with some assistance for stability to no assistance and no assistance on stability. So what I would do is do the hover lunges facing forward, having as little weight on your hands as possible. Then I would go with a single arm, and it's contralateral. So if you're squatting on the right leg, you do it with the left arm and vice versa. And if you can get 10, 15 of those, then what I do is the wall hover lunge, where I'll have someone face a wall. They're usually about a foot away, and I'll have that like their fingertips are on the wall. And what that means is that they can't pull themselves up, but they still have some stability support with that. And then once they're really getting that, and again, don't let that back foot touch the floor. I know it sounds crazy, but if that back foot even breathes on the floor, it gets so much easier. And a lot of people have trouble doing hover lunges without touching down. So don't let that foot touch the floor at all. If you can't do an exercise with the foot without the foot touching the floor, you're still not ready for the next one. And then do them on the wall. And then once you're like, yeah, I can get this on the wall pretty good, then you do it free. Then you do it free form. And that can be real eye-opening. It's funny, every stage of those lunge or the squat variations, people are like, oh, this is getting easier. Well, let's do it on the wall. Oh yeah, this can't be too hard. I can't get up. Like I can't stand up. It's like, yeah, it's really telling when you take away some of that assistance. Cristobal is saying, hey Matt, what would you consider as the best way to progress on calisthenics? Any way that you can, my friend. I think that most people really focus on increasing reps and volume instead of making the exercise more intense. I'll agree. So remember that the three variations of progression, I mean, I'm broadly speaking here, but fundamental ways to progress is time. So that's reps and sets, okay, or volume. There's intensity, which is correlated, not exactly caused, but correlated with resistance. And then there's, of course, proficiency. And proficiency is all the subjective things, your range of motion, your tension control, your stability, your breathing. Can you get the muscles to do what you want? How well can you do the exercise? And yeah, I fully agree, especially in the calisthenics space, that far too many people have a very narrow range. I think I have this coming up in a video actually on the advent calendar. They have too much of a narrow area that they're trying to progress. Like I can do 50 push-ups, then 80 push-ups, then 100 push-ups. Like, okay, great. But remember, you're always only going to make progress in one of those three areas for so long, and then you're just going to plateau endlessly forever. And usually the best way to keep going is to focus on progression in the other areas. And it's very hard for people to do that sometimes, especially if you don't understand progressive calisthenics theory, because it's like, well, how do I add resistance to push-ups? Well, you got weight vests. Yeah, sure. You can have someone put their hands on your back. Okay, yeah, that works too. But if you don't understand progressive calisthenics theory, your ability to build muscle and strength is severely limited, and it always will be. That's what I covered in the first video on that advent calendar. You've got to understand progressive calisthenics theory. It is an absolute essential must-have, and that's why I wrote my book, Progressive and Weighted Calisthenics. Because if anybody ever came to me and they're like, I want to build muscle and strength calisthenics, read that book. Don't read this one. Don't read the one on suspension calisthenics. Don't read grind style calisthenics or any of the others. You have to understand that first and foremost. Because if you don't have that, you're literally trying to drive and you don't know how to operate a car. Yeah. What's the pedal on the right do kind of thing? You have to understand that stuff. It's not complicated. It's not hard to understand, but you do need to understand it in order to know how to literally add weight and resistance to your working muscles in a progressive manner. Master Dave saying, hey, Matt, how do you gain flexibility for martial arts? Do you do static, passive stretching, active? What do you recommend? I just use the types of movements that require big ranges of motion. Deep squats, deep lunges, T-planks, exercises that require mobility. The best mobility training is strength exercises that require big ranges of motion. And the best ways to oftentimes get stronger is to use mobility exercises that require a good degree of strength. So always remember, though, that fundamentally, folks, right, you have functional ingredients in your training. You don't get results from a particular kind of exercise. You get results because you have a functional demand on your muscles. So if you have a stretching exercise that requires strength in your hips are going to get stronger. It doesn't matter if it's a stretching or mobility exercise. If it requires more strength, your hips will get stronger. It doesn't matter if you're doing a strength exercise and it requires good mobility in your hips are going to become more mobile. It's all about that functional demand. And the best exercises that you're going to utilize for the result that you want is whatever exercise you can create the strongest or the greatest amount of that demand with. Forget all the science of like, this is the best exercise for abs, this is the best exercise for building bigger legs and everything. That's generalization speak. But if I say, okay, the best exercise for building up your legs is lunges, and for whatever reason, you have very poor stability while doing lunges, and you have a real hard time being able to adequately challenge your muscles with them. But on the other hand, Bulgarian split squats are something that you can really push your muscles to. Which one is going to be the easiest way? Again, it always comes down to whatever's easiest for you. What is going to be the easiest way for you to challenge the functional requirement that you want? I want to build strength. Okay, what exercise is going to be the easiest way to require more strength in the muscle? So one of the reasons I've been doing isometrics for the past 2 weeks. It is one of the easiest ways to create an insane amount of tension in your muscles. It's very easy to work the muscle very hard. And that's going to be the, quote, easiest way for at least me to be able to challenge my muscles that way, which is why it works so darn well for me. But the lesson I really want to blow into the stratosphere here is remember that it's not what's best for everybody, it's what's best for you. It doesn't matter what the science says about eating chicken. What matters is, how do you feel when eating chicken? How do you feel if you have more chicken in your diet? Do you feel, look, and perform better? Great, it's good for you. Oh, no, Matt, you need to know the science, blah, blah, blah. Just screw it. If you're getting better results, it's better, full stop. So go based off of your experience, my friends. That's what you want to be listening to. Cristobal is asking, how can I get more power and explosiveness on pull-ups? What do you think is the best rep range for power, and is doing explosive and hypertrophy training on the same day a good idea? Yeah, sure, you can do it the same way. So remember that explosiveness is a skill. Skill we do in the strength phase or the proficiency phase of a grind style workout. So we work on our tension control, then we work on our stability, and then you're like, okay, what am I trying to improve on as far as the power, the proficiency, the skill, because strength is a skill, power is a skill, stability to a high degree is a skill, whatever these things are. Whenever you're like, I want to be able to do the thing better, that's a skill. That's what you work on there. So you program it the same way you do strength and everything else. You keep the reps relatively low, you keep fatigue relatively at bay, and you put everything you've got into the rep. So Paul Wade's Explosive Calisthenics, aka Convict Conditioning 3, is the kind of the Bible for this. And I'm not just mentioning that because I'm name checked in it. Believe me, that was a great thing to find the other day when I was reading Convict Conditioning 3, and he was mentioning about dips, and he's like, yeah, people love dips. Al Cavadlo, Matt Schifferly loves dips. I was like, holy shit, my name is in Convict Conditioning 3. That was crazy to find. I'm just bragging right now, I know. But hey, it's fun to do these sorts of things. But the bottom line is, and I kind of agree with Paul Wade on this one, is going like multiples of 3. 3, 6, or 9. Usually, even to this day, is it bad to do 12? No, it's not bad. But again, we want a lot of power. I want you to grab that bar, and I want you to pull with so much force the bar bends downwards. You're not going to be able to do that for 20 reps. I don't care if you're going to do 20 reps of pull-ups. You've got to really power through it. So you gotta, like, 3 is a good one to go for. Just bang, 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 and you jump off. And you're like, but I can do so much more. Exactly. You don't want to have a lot of fatigue. You don't want to burn things out. You're training for power. You will not have power if you're fatigued. Now, I know there's a lot of coaches out there who will be like, yeah, but I train my athletes to try to be powerful in a fatigued state. So I'll have them like do 100 squats, and then we'll hit the weight sleds. It's like, yeah, that's a totally different scenario. That's trying to build power in fatigue. But that's different. We're trying to do it as well as possible. They're trying to do as well as possible under fatigue. That's a different scenario. So 3, 6, or 9 is usually good rep ranges for that. Typically, like 3 is a good way. And do as many sets as you can get the power with. Again, adaptive training. Grind style is all about adaptive training. Get as much as you can. I'm not going to tell you how many to do because, again, the method-based approach in fitness that's out there will usually say you'll get results if you do this much work. That's not how fitness works. You don't build muscle or burn fat or get leaner and get better at something because you do a certain amount of work. You get it because you create a stimulus. And if you can do more work to create a stronger stimulus, great. But sometimes we have limitations. You have limits to your motivation. You have limits to your resources, like your equipment. You have limits to your time and your energy and stuff. In which case, don't overdo it. If you can literally jump up on that pull-up bar and you get 3 sets of 1 rep before you're like, oh man, I'm really starting to fade it here. Great, you're done. Don't keep pushing it. And then once you're fatigued, then go into the hypertrophy training. Then you blast out the bicep curls. Then you hit rows until you're barely moving and your muscles are aching. Then you hit that stuff. You can do that in the same workout there. I know it's a long-winded answer. Sorry about that, folks. I'm trying to get a little more succinct here. Dominic is saying, hey, Matt, do you think it's a good approach to measure time periods for each exercise, aka 40 seconds of push-ups, choose the progression that I can barely manage for that time? Absolutely. So remember, folks, that repetitions are just a timing variable because your muscles don't know what reps are. They know time and tension. That's it. They just know those 2 variables. So if you say, I don't want to count reps, I'd rather go by time. Yeah, sure. That's fantastic. It's just a little bit sometimes tricky as far as being able to measure it because I'm looking at a clock or I've got a timer and it's like I got a stopwatch. So I hit the stopwatch and then I jump up on the pull-up bar. But wait a minute, that took 3 seconds. And now I'm doing pull-ups, but I can't quite see the stopwatch. So it can be a little impractical in some cases. That's why I like the Gym Boss timers. Again, you can put it on your phone or you can get the little pager ones that you can pick up and you can literally wear it on your belt where you can say, okay, I'm going to see if I can do this exercise for 40 seconds. So then you can have a countdown timer. So you can get ready and get all set. Beep. And then you start going and you see if you can make it. And I'm barely making beep. Okay, good. Thank you. So get a fitness timer if you want to go by time like that. It just makes it a lot easier and much more practical to use. But yeah, it's a fun way to go about it. Really good break for the brain if you're sick of counting reps. Joseph Bello, it's good to see as always. Hello, Matt. What is your new book, Be Fit and Live Free, about? Is there a little bit of everything or is it specific in content? It's not specific. So here's the thing is I get asked a lot by people to write books about what they should specifically be doing. Case in point, I've got a lot of friends. Well, I guess we're all getting up there in age. I mean, God, I was ruminating the other day about a friend. I was like, isn't it scary that in 2 months I'm going to be 46? I'm like, damn, In a few years, I'm staring down the barrel of 50. Like, what the hell? How did that happen? But a lot of my friends are in their late 40s, early 50s, almost 60 in many cases. And they keep asking me, Matt, what kind, you should write a book for older people, how to be in shape for older people, how to be in shape for people over 40 and 50. I was like, nope, absolutely not. I absolutely refuse to do that because it's complete BS. I'm never going to write a book for people over 40 or 50 or whatever, because I would never base a program on your age. Never going to base a diet on your age. That's completely irresponsible as a coach and a trainer, because the true way to do it is to say, okay, what can you do? I want to build muscle and strength. Great. What can you do? It's always the first thing I do with every new client. I don't care how old you are. I don't care what gender you are. I don't care what your income is. All I care about is, what can you do? Because believe me, there's no such thing as a way for people to do things because like, oh, if you're over 40, you can't do push-ups anymore. Bullshit. I know people in their 80s who can blast them out like a Marine. I also know people who are in their 20s who couldn't do a push-up to save their life. So I'm going to train the guy who's 20 who can't do a push-up like someone who can't do a push-up. And I'm going to train the 80-year-old who can blast out push-ups like someone who can blast out push-ups. I'm not going to train them differently because they're 80 or 20. Okay, long-winded rant. Sorry, getting back on track here. So is it about anything specific? Absolutely not. Because anything specific, the more specific I get, the more I'm just guessing about what you need. That's the point I was trying to make. I mean, I can write anything. I can write a program and say, okay, on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and every fourth Saturday after the blue moon, you're going to do 100 repetitions. Now, I'm just making it purely up. I'm just pulling those numbers out of my ass. But there's a weird quirk about the human nature that we believe things, and we put more validity into things that are specific. You know, what is the old joke out there? Like 27.9% of all statistics are made up. And it's like, oh, really? It's like, of course, you believe that because I made it specific. I made it sound specific. You know, it's the same thing with diet and exercise. Happens all the time. This is not what you should do. I don't know what you should do in your diet. Nobody does. I don't know what kind of workout program you should do. Nobody does. Anything I put out there saying, do these number sets and reps and do this exercise is purely a guessing game on my part. Now, of course, we can go with general assumptions that might be pretty good. You know, if you came to me and you're like, I want to lose weight, I'm like, okay, stop drinking alcohol, cut back on sugar and processed foods, get plenty of protein and fruits and veggies. Okay, now, one, do you really need someone to tell you these things? You probably already knew it. But you could be like, I don't drink. I'm already eating plenty of protein, mostly fruits, veggies, and I don't eat too much. I don't have much of a sweet tooth, and I get plenty of sleep. So again, I'm guessing. I'm just basing on random guesses and assumptions. What this does is it gives you the roadmap on how fitness actually works. Because if I ask you, what can you do in your program or your diet to move the needle this week, your answers are going to be a hell of a lot better than what I would come up with. Why? Because you know yourself. You know what you're capable of. If I say do 10 push-ups, you know, oh, that's easy, or, oh, God, that's going to be hard. You know, if I said, okay, you're going to do a lot of push-ups, and you're in the back of your brain, you're like, I don't want to do a lot of push-ups. I hate doing push-ups. I had a bad experience in high school, or did too many of them in karate class or something. I hate doing push-ups. You know that about yourself. I don't. It would be stupid of me to recommend an exercise to you that you hate doing, because what are the chances you're actually going to do it? But you could be like, dude, I love these stretch bands. I got that new X3 bar, and oh man, it feels amazing. You know that about you. So you can use that information and this blueprint and apply it in the way that's best for you. Because the thing that makes by far the biggest difference in your success is not about your diet and exercise program. It's about whether or not you achieve better personal alignment. I got a whole chapter on it in here. Personal alignment is the thing that makes or breaks 99.999% of people's success or failure. If you have better personal alignment, whatever you're doing, I don't care what your diet and exercise looks like. If you've got better personal alignment, chances are extremely good you're going to be very successful. But if you're following the best diet and exercise program and it's optimized up to wazoo, but it's pulling you out of personal alignment, failure is almost guaranteed. Now, what do I mean by personal alignment? Basically, that means working with you rather than against you, working with your body, working with your environment, working with your circumstances, working with your resources. I can tell you all day long why Olympic lifting would make you an absolute fitness god. But if you're like, but I don't have a barbell, but I hate doing Olympic lifting, but I suck at it, but I would rather do these. Olympic lifting is going to pull you out of personal alignment. It's a bad choice for you. Now, if you're really hell bent on it, you're like, well, I'm going to get some coaching. I'm going to learn to do it. And then it'll pull you back into personal alignment. But if you said, but I really like using kettlebells instead, I really like calisthenics or bands or isometrics, it's like, good, go with that. Go with that instead. Whatever works with your mind, body, and lifestyle is going to be easier. It's going to be more effective. It's going to be more maintainable. And it's going to be a whole lot more enjoyable too, believe me. I get much better results from calisthenics and isometrics than I ever did from weightlifting. Does that mean that calisthenics and isometrics is a better way for building muscle and strength? Absolutely not. It means it's a better way to build muscle and strength for me because it works with my personal alignment. But if you tried calisthenics and you're like, I hate this. This is terrible. I feel horrible on it. Well, for the love of God, don't do calisthenics. It'd be a very bad idea. But again, only you know that stuff. The majority of information you need to know in order to get in the best shape of your life is the stuff you inherently know about you and yourself and your lifestyle. And then you use this blueprint to make sense of how to apply it. And that's going to give you a lot better results. It's going to be a lot easier to maintain those results. And it's going to give you a lot more lifestyle freedom to do whatever the hell you want. So you're not compromising your fitness for the sake of your quality of life or vice versa. Because that's usually how people set up fitness these days is if I want to be in shape, I got to compromise my quality of life. I can't go to the party. I can't go to the barbecue. I've got to sacrifice time with friends to go to the gym and stuff like that. That message is very prevalent in our fitness culture. If you want to be in shape, you've got to compromise your quality of life. And I don't blame people. People all the time will tell me, they'll be like, I'd love to get in shape, but I don't want to give up coffee and potato chips and, Friday night happy hours. I'm here to tell you, fine, don't. And if you know the blueprint on how this works, you don't have to give that stuff up. In fact, you're probably better off including those things, and you're going to be in better shape for it. All right, lots to say there, but you can tell how passionate I am about this. It's taken me over 15 years to basically compile the information in that one book. You get to read it in a couple of hours. Lots of trial and error and mistakes behind it. Cinder Thrax saying, hey, Matt, I love overcoming ISOs, as do I. Thanks. I have an issue with my central nervous system crashing an hour or so after workouts with too many exercises. The muscles are fine. How can I train my central nervous system to handle more exercises? Okay, a lot to unpack here. Great exercise, a great question. Number one is don't forget that your nervous system's getting loaded by other stressors in your life too. That's why they call it the stress cup in fitness. A lot of times I'll be training someone and they'll come into the gym and it's like, good Lord, you look like you've been rode hard and put away wet. What's going on? And like, I've been fighting with my husband or wife. I had fights with my boss. I'm behind on this deadline. Like stress. I'm like, for the love of God, we're certainly not going to do a Metcon. That's just stress piled on top of stress. So see if you can manage stress outside of your life too, because that's contributing to that. Second is, why are you doing so many exercises? Usually, like a lot of times, if you read the Ultimate Isometrics Manual from Dragon Door, a lot of those programs, they have 3 exercises. Promethean, I believe, is an overhead press, deadlift, or a hack squat, and then a bicep curl or something like that. One of the great things about isometrics is that it covers so many bases so quickly, so effectively. And so you probably don't need more than 4 or 5 exercises in a workout. Have different workouts, because remember, you can do isometrics more frequently. So you can have several different workouts that you do in a week. But I would say keep it to 4 or 5 exercises typically in each workout. Second is, remember, and this is one of the things, I'm going to make up a new video here shortly on how to get more out of your isometrics training. One of the things that I think a lot of people assume about isometrics is that you always have to contract your muscles to the max. And it's simply not true. You can get a lot out of your isometrics. In fact, sometimes it may be even smarter and more prudent to program an isometric with like 80% of your tension. Because remember what I was saying earlier, you go to the uppermost limits of tension or time, and you start creating poor habits or reinforcing whatever neural habits you have. So I would say don't go all out all the time. Do it like every other workout or every 3 workouts, because you can still get a lot if you're creating a decent amount of tension. It's a really interesting thing to figure out. I was training with a friend of mine a couple days ago, and it was a case where we were doing isometric deadlifts, and she's like, I just can't get my glutes on. I'm like, great, I want you to have an isometric deadlift, but only contract to like 50%, 60%. And all I want you focusing on is how hard you can contract the glutes. Don't try to pull on the handles hard, just contract the glutes hard. And it was a total game changer, completely changed the workout for her. So don't feel like you got to go all out. The other thing too is look at just time. The thing with isometrics, particularly if you're not using an isomax, is you don't know when you have a stopping point, because you can always just keep driving yourself into the ground relentlessly. So maybe cut back on the volume a little bit. All that together should help you with that central nervous system issue, my friend. Hope it feels okay for you. Joseph Bello saying, oh, Be Fit, Live Free sounds like a good book. I like your response. Thank you very much. Yep. Mariano, it's always good to see you, my friend. Thank you so much for coming on. Hey, Matt, if we're talking about gym machines, what are your 3 favorites? Be Fit, Live Free. Oh, let's see. Well, I'm always a big fan of the cable machines. Cable machines, again, simplicity, versatility. You can get the force going from different directions. They offer a lot of individual customization as far as, where you're rotating handles and stuff. When in doubt, I always recommend use rotating handles if possible. So cable machines allow that. Dumbbells, kettlebells, suspension straps, things that have rotating or allow some sort of degree of rotation, just because it gives you versatility. It gives you the ability to work force around your joints rather than into them. It's just more people are better off with that in the long run. So I would say any sort of cable machines sort of thing. Sometimes you'll find a deadlift bar, like a deadlift machine. So it's not like a trap bar or something, but Hammer Strength used to have these deadlift style machines. They look like shrug bars. And we used to always use them. I used to work at a gym that was all Hammer Strength machines. Loved it. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. But you can use those for deadlifts. It's extremely effective, especially the Romanian deadlifts. But basically, yeah, any type of machine that affords you more individualization as far as how well you use your body relative to the machine is probably going to be, in my opinion, a better way to go. Oops, scusi. Master Dave, hey Matt, are you for hips moving first during squat movement patterns? Yeah, generally. And we say first, but like just a split second before. Sometimes people really take this too much to the extreme where they start squatting, and I used to do this too. I used to be one of those trainers who used to be like, squat like you're sitting back in a chair. Not anymore. Even if you read my book, Smart Bodyweight Training, I talk about how squatting is not at all like sitting back in a chair. It's a good cue to start with your hips moving back, but it's literally the first 2 movements, and then your knees start moving, first 2 inches, and then your knees start moving. So you don't want to feel like you're sitting back. Your weight should not be falling backwards when you do squat movement patterns. It should be pretty stable right in the middle of your foot. So yeah, start there, but don't let your weight fall back. ME coming on saying, Matt, I can't get the rings to touch my chatting horizontal rows. Not sure what you mean by chatting there. I'll infer on that in a second. Should I switch to doing suspension form on facing a door at about a 45-degree angle or so instead? I say play with it, my friend. You know, a lot of times with calisthenics and suspension calisthenics and stuff, we get into this mindset that there's one variation or level of resistance we should be using. I don't know where this idea came from. To a certain degree, I blame some ideas of, calisthenics is positioned sometimes in programs as steps. Like you're at this step and you only do that step, and then you're at this step and you only do that step, and you close push-ups until you can do these many reps, and then you graduate to archer push-ups and stuff. That's not how strength training works. You should always have a variety of techniques and resistances in your pocket that you're using at all times. So I would say start off with a lower level of resistance, like at a 45-degree angle for sure, and try to get that technique dialed in. Then you can come down a little further and see if you can help it. Then go down a little further, see if you can maintain it and stuff, and see what happens. Don't feel like you've got to pigeonhole yourself into one technique. Use a variety of techniques. Easier ones to hone in on your technique, harder ones to challenge that technique. Kawai with the fire emoji saying, hey, Matt, sometimes I feel that I lose tension in my glutes when going down at my unilateral squats. Yes, very common issue. The same goes for my biceps when stretched. Yep. What can I do to fix this? Thanks. Very common, my friends, because remember that it's a hell of a lot easier to tense and contract a muscle in a flexed position and a lot harder in an elongated position. So bicep flexed, much easier. Arm straight, that's harder unless you practice it. And it's literally just that, practice. So what you do is you get down into a deep squat or the split squat, whatever, or you get hanging from a bar or even just having your arm straight, and you practice trying to contract the muscle. That's all there is to it. Muscle tension control is about practice. It is a skill. And you have to practice it. And literally trying to contract the muscle is literally all it takes. Now, you may very well not feel it very much. You get down into a deep squat a lot of times, and I tell people, contract your glutes. And they're like, not going. And after a few days, they're like, still not happening. I'm like, I know. Literally, just keep on it, though. I know it doesn't feel like anything is happening, but I promise you it is, because you're hanging from that pull-up bar, and then after a few days or maybe a week or two, and you're like, oh, I kind of feel it a little bit. It's there, just a bit, just a slight bit, and then the next time it's like it's there more, and then more, and then it just snowballs. And after a week, you're like, whoa, holy smokes! Now I've really got it. That's all it takes. It's not about different exercise or anything. It's literally just trying to contract the muscles. All right, Sean, take us home, my friend. Hey, Matt, when doing grind style, how do you determine when or if you add more sets to the various chain movements for progression? Is it just when you feel you're not getting full fatigue with the volume? Yes, Sean, in the muscles. So I don't use sets for progression, okay? I don't ever say, okay, if you could do 2 sets, then progress to 3, then progress to 4, then progress to 5, and blah, 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 blah. I don't use sets for progression. I use sets as the amount of work you can do in a given set. So in grind style, we've got our strength or proficiency phase, and I always tell people, just do as many as you can with proficiency, because that's going to be determined by your level of energy and how much time you have and how much motivation you have and how hard you're pushing and a whole host of other factors. I'm never going to tell you how many sets you should do, because you should do as many sets as you can do. Sometimes that's going to be only 2, and sometimes it could be 6. Generally, you'll probably fall around the 2 to 3 or 4 set range, but that's going to be most of the time. But dude, if you can keep going for sure. Now, typically though, if you're like, dude, I got 9 sets, I'm like, why aren't we doing this heavier? Like, why aren't we pushing a little bit harder? But if you're at the same time saying, I can never do more than 2 sets, I'm like, probably pushing that fatigue level a little too much there. Let's back it off just a little bit. Just save a rep, or we'll go just a smidge later and stuff. But yeah, sometimes you just, well, I got 2 good sets in, and then for whatever reason, I started really going downhill. All right, you get 2 sets, but I don't want to limit you. I certainly don't want to be like, only do 2 sets. And then after 2 sets, you're like, oh, now I feel like I'm really getting warmed up and ready to do this. Well, then keep going. By all means, get what you can, my friends. We're in this workout to get as much as we can out of it. So get as much as you can, but no more than that. So I don't use sets for progressive variable. I just use it as a variable, as an amount that you can do per your circumstances. Hopefully that makes sense. So thank you very much, everybody. Again, my new book, Be Fit, Live Free. I know I touched on several topics here, much more in detail, a lot more stuff here about why this stuff is actually working. There's just far too much to cover in a single episode here on the podcast. Again, though, everything in this book is in my podcast and my videos. Just good luck going through all those hundreds of hours of video and podcast to get everything that you can get here in one book. It's not even, how many pages is this again? 120. That's it. That's all it distilled down. 15 years of learning and hard work down to 120 pages. Going to change your life, if not at least your body. Links down below if you want on Amazon, Kindle, paperback, as well as the new RDP PDF store. All that is greatly appreciated, as it does help to support the channel. It is helping me to pay rent, and I greatly appreciate it, folks. I will see you, well, actually, next week. We'll see. We'll see if I can get an episode out next week, because next week at this time, yep, if my math is correct, next week at this time, I believe I will be home in Vermont. So I will try to get something out as far as a live feed or at least an audio that I might record. So make sure you're subscribed to the RDP podcast on your podcast directories. And also check out, I've got a video coming out. I was just speaking with my friend Paul Tielik, who has basically literally had 2 huge major surgeries on his hips. And last I talked to him, he's going hiking in the Rocky Mountains here. And he largely recovered and built back his strength with isometric training, and he's almost 70. So quite the story. Keep an eye out for that on the RDP podcast directories and on the RDP YouTube channel. Don't forget also the RDP Advent calendar is still going on. Several more days here, all about building more muscle and strength with calisthenics training. So make sure you subscribe for that as well. I am out, folks. I will talk to you next time. Until then, be fit and live free.